Hello and welcome back to Phase 2, and this is Module 2. Last module we talked about crisis intervention, specifically as it relates to abortion-minded women, and now we're just going to talk about communication skills, listening skills, because a lot of what we do in the room with our clients is in listening. And you know, a lot of people think they're good listeners, but maybe they're doing some things that kind of portray the opposite, like they're not really paying attention. And so in this module, we're going to give you just some examples, some ways, some practical things that you can do to help really make you a better listener and a better communicator so that when you're with the client, whether it's in a crisis situation or whether it's in a life matters situation or a male mentoring situation, coaching situation, whatever it is, that you're really communicating well and being able to show them the love and the respect that you have through the way that you're listening to them. So we're going to talk about this today. But first of all, what is communication? All right, shout it out. What is communication? Give me a few ideas or write them down on your paper. What do you think? If you had to define communication, what would it be? Well, communication.
The act of communicating.
Wow, just like that. The act of communicating. Never define a word by using it same word in the definition, but okay. We'll get that. Communication is connecting in a meaningful way with whoever we are meeting with or on the phone with. So communication is connecting, right? In a meaningful way. I'm trying to connect with you, even though you're sitting there watching me on a screen. I'm trying to connect with you as best I can in a meaningful way. And we connect with people through a lot of different ways. But interestingly enough, let's look at some of these channels of communication. First of all, look at these percentages. I have it on the screen right now so you can see the percentages of what communication is made of. The spoken word is only 7% of how we communicate. Interestingly, isn't it? It's very interesting because we often think communication is talking, talk, back and forth, but it's actually only 7% of what real communication is. Let's look at all the rest of it. Voice and tone is 38%. You can probably... Those of you who are parents will say, yeah, because like you might communicate with your kids, you might say something to them, and you know by their voice and tone that what they're telling you back isn't exactly what they're telling you back, right? Voice and tone is a huge part, 38%. Body posture and gestures. I gesture a lot, my body posture. It can reveal a lot about you too. If I'm sitting like this, what am I communicating? Probably something like, I'm not really very interested, I don't want to be here. Some of you might be sitting like this right now watching this video. Well, you are communicating that you don't really want to be watching the video. Our body posture, our gestures communicate a lot. And nonverbals, look at that. Our nonverbals, our body posture, our gestures, our nonverbals are so super important. 55% is made up of our nonverbals. And so we're going to spend some time looking at nonverbals in this module as well. All right, 3 parts of the process of consultation. When we are meeting with somebody, when we're communicating with somebody, there's 3 parts we want to remember. First of all, connect, understand, and guide. And we've kind of talked about this a lot in our crisis intervention. It's kind of the same type thing. And in discipleship, all of that, they're the same thing, just called differently. Connect and understand and guide. And so we're connecting with them. When we connect with them, we use our active listening skills to help understand the meaning behind the words. Helps us make a connection with our client. Take a look at 10 characteristics of an active listener. And this is from CareNet. You're not expected to remember or memorize all of these, but let's just look at this list right now, okay? First of all, here's some things of a person that you know is really connected. They're actively listening. That person shows sincere attention, okay? You can't see it right now, but I am being filmed by the person who is doing all the filming, and he is acting like he's paying attention, but it's not really sincere, okay? Sincere attention, you can really tell if someone's paying attention. All right, so shows sincere attention, shows respect and acceptance, does not, and this one's hard, does not rehearse his own input or response while another person speaks. How many times have you listened to somebody tell the story and at the same time in your mind you're thinking, what am I going to say next? And that happens a lot in the consultation room at LifePlan. I think that's one of the hardest things for us to do, is to really focus on that person without trying to think, okay, what am I going to say next? How am I going to direct this next? But that's what we need to do. To really be actively listening, we need to be really focusing on what they're saying and sitting in that moment, even if it means we don't have an immediate response, because we're listening to them. So don't rehearse in your mind what you're going to say next. Another one, pay attention to nonverbal communication, both what you're communicating nonverbally in the room and what your client is communicating nonverbally. If your client comes in and they're sitting back and they're really upset, or if your client is trying to wipe tears or has tears in their eyes, they're communicating something nonverbally. So pay attention to the nonverbals they have. Another part of active listening, aware of the big picture while listening to the details. So try to keep in mind what it is that really is the big picture here, but also pay attention to those details. Tolerates periods of silence and uses them effectively. This is so important in active communication. You don't have to always have something to say. And that is hard for us, a lot of us. A lot of us want to come in right away with our own stories or a solution or something. But sometimes that period of silence can be the most powerful thing that happens in a consultation room. When your client is sharing the story, sharing something that happened within this week, and they stop talking, don't feel like you have to fill that space with something. Just sit there for a minute. Maybe the client will keep going and share more. Maybe the client just needs you to be in the moment with them, feeling what they're feeling. So tolerate those periods of silence. Don't let them scare you. Do not allow emotional moments to throw you off track. If something gets emotional, don't allow that to throw you off in the rest of the setting. It's okay for things to be emotional, okay? You can be there with them and you can be there, but don't let that get you all emotional and also going off track of what you're trying to do. Ask questions for clarification, but let me say, oftentimes we think asking questions is like what we need to do all the time, but there's such a thing as good questions and bad questions, which we're going to talk about. And also, sometimes it's better not to ask the questions, okay, to try to rephrase things so they're not always questions, or it might feel like we're just probing and just interviewing them and trying to get all this information out. So use questions for clarification, but use them sparingly. Maintain proper eye contact. Look at the person who is talking to you. Don't be looking at the clock on the wall or your watch or the phone or someplace else. Really look at the person who is talking to you. Eye contact is important, and recognize that every person is unique. Every person is unique with their own unique story. So those are all characteristics of an active listener. Now, let's talk about nonverbal communication. What are we communicating non-verbally? Well, that includes our posture, okay, how we're sitting or how we're standing, our appearance, how we dressed for the day, okay, that tells something about us. Our head movement, you know, are we always glancing? I was having a conversation with somebody the other day and they kept looking at their watch. You know what that told me? That told me they weren't really interested in the conversation they were having with me, right? They kept looking. They were too worried about what was coming up next and where they needed to be. That's nonverbal. Be careful what your head is doing, where your head is moving, even nodding in agreement or shaking your head. Be careful with that. Also, eye movement, where your eyes go, your hand movement, eye contact, facial expression, sounds, ways of talking. Again, pay attention to both the nonverbals you are sending and the nonverbals you are receiving. Okay, what are you portraying through your nonverbals? Plus, what is your client portraying? And that can really give you a feel of what's going on. So, one way to remember a good way to sit, and yes, there are good ways to sit in your chair when you are talking with a client or with anybody to show that you're listening, okay? A good way to remember that is to use the acronym ROLES. And again, this is taken from CareNet, R-O-L-E-S, ROLES, where the first one is you want to be relaxed. So people can tell the difference between somebody who is relaxed in the chair and somebody who's really uptight and not sure what they're doing and wanting to be. You know, I move around a lot, but if I'm sitting here fidgeting and moving around the whole time the person's talking, it looks like I'm not relaxed at all, like I'm nervous about being there. So I want to relax. I want to be open. So I want to kind of sit forward, my legs relaxed and open. I don't want to have my legs crossed. Some of us, that's like a more comfortable thing to do. But when we cross our legs, it can show a different thing. So we want to be kind of relaxed and open, leaning forward a little bit, maintaining eye contact with them, and squared off. Squared off means that you're just kind of in that direction, that they're in the direction. You don't have like a leg going over here and a leg going over here. You know, you're really just squared off with that person. That's roles. Relaxed, open, lean forward, eye contact, squared off. Okay? Good thing to remember when you're in a room with a person. All right. Next step. That was all part of connecting. Active listening. Okay? So just for fun and to kind of mix things up a little bit, we're going to watch a little skit that my boys did to show the difference between active listening and inactive listening. Enjoy.
Tell me what's going on in your life.
So like, this is gonna be so hard. Just gonna be like, oh man. So like, okay, I was going to the bread store right last week, and like,
Okay, I'm gonna stop you right there. What were you thinking?
what do you mean? What was I thinking? I went to the bread store. Dude, you are insanely.
Whoa! Why are we making about this? This is about you, okay? You need to show me. Why did you make this decision?
Just let me explain.
Okay, tell me.
My bread store.
Listen, Philip. I am here to listen to you and to see what the mistake you made was and how you can be less of a failure next time. So please, tell me about your trip to the bread store.
All right. I hope you enjoyed that little skit of it, and I hope that you will understand and practice active listening with your roles and not inattentive listening. Let's talk now about the next point, which is understanding. So that was all part of connecting with our client. Now we want to really understand what's going on with our client. This is making sure that you hear what they're saying. Every time a client comes in to see you, they're going to have a different story. They're going to have different things going on in their life. We want to really understand what it is they're saying, what it is they need from us, how we can help them, how we can go along with them in the process. So some ways to help us understand. It's just, again, this is active listening skills and good listening skills that go on with it. And one way is restatement or summarizing. And this sometimes can seem really silly because we're like, okay, somebody says, yeah, I had a really bad day. And you repeat back, you had a really bad day. Well, yeah, that's what they said. But if it's done the right way, it can show that you're listening. So you're just restating. In restatement, you're just restating what the client just said verbatim, okay? Restating it back to them. This is a little different from rephrasing. Rephrasing is summarizing it in your own words, but you're not adding any feelings. So if somebody comes in and they say, yeah, I had a really bad day. You know, I missed my alarm, went off at the wrong time, or it didn't go off at all, and I was late to work. I got yelled at by my boss. I came home, my kids had a bad day. They were grumpy. I yelled at my kids. It was just horrible. So to rephrase that without adding feelings, you're going to say something like, sounds like you had a really rough day. You know, and you can go on with that. You can say, you know, your alarm went off, or your alarm didn't go off on time, you were late, and then things just kept happening that just added on top of each other and just made for a really rough day. So I'm just kind of summarizing back to them, and we'll take a look at how this can look in a little bit. Also, the third one that's a little bit different than the other two, you've got restatement, which is exactly staying it back, rephrasing, which is kind of summarizing what the person said, and then reflecting impressions. And this is when you bring in feelings, which you may have heard this as reflecting feelings or as interpretive listening. Any of those things might be called that. This is when you start bringing the feelings in. So if they say something, you know, that same one I just gave you, I had a really bad day, it was awful, everybody kept yelling, you reflect the feelings back. It sounds like you had a pretty tough day, that you're feeling kind of frustrated with what happened. Okay? I'm reflecting back the feelings that I'm getting from that person. And that can just help to clarify also, because if they disagree, they can say, well, no, actually, I'm not frustrated. I'm just mad, you know, or whatever. It can help you to get that too. So these are important things to practice. So we're going to take a moment and look at another little example of how these can be done in a pseudo-counseling setting, because again, it's with my boys. So let's take a look at some of these restatement, rephrasing questions and how we can do it in a practical setting. So Micah, tell me what's going on.
So I was taking my pregnant cat in my 1980s Volkswagen Bug, and we were driving cross country in our trip. You see, we do this every year, and she's pregnant. She jumped out the window, and she landed in a ditch, and then we lost the baby, and I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And the worst part is, when she hit the ground, it just started to pour.
So your pregnant cat fell out the window. That sounds like it was pretty tough for you.
Yeah, you see, when she went flying out that window, it was almost as if my future went out that window. It broke me, and I don't know what I'm going to do now. I don't know what to do.
It sounds like you're pretty upset about what happened. Like that's left you a little bit confused.
Yeah, you see, my whole future was with, her name's Lorraine. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
We just had so much good times together. And I don't know what I'm gonna do. Sorry.
All right, very good. Practicing, this is a good thing to practice, and we're going to have some practice time with this also afterwards when you're done, going through your workbook, looking at some ways that you can rephrase things, and also practicing as you role play afterwards with your shift leader. But let's move on to the next thing, and that's asking good questions. So there's a difference between good questions and bad questions. Yes, it's possible to ask bad questions when you are in a consulting setting like this and you're trying to listen. So questions should be for clarifying. You want to avoid why questions. Because a lot of times that can even bring judgment with it, like, why do you feel that way? Well, it makes it sound like they shouldn't be feeling that way, right? Or avoid those why questions. Why did you do that? That's not a good question to ask them when they're in this room with you. Also avoid rapid fire questions, just question after question after question after question. I know on the intake it feels like that's what we're doing, but we're not talking about the intake now. We're talking about a regular Life Matters class that you're doing. Avoid those rapid fire questions. Avoid leading questions, like maybe you have the answer and you want them to get there. Don't lead them on with their question. And avoid close-ended questions. Instead, questions that would just have a yes or no answer. Okay? Did that make you mad? Yes, no. Why did that make you mad? These are all not good questions to ask. Good questions to ask are more open-ended questions that are focused on the individual. Questions that encourage a person to talk about themselves and to think things through, okay? In fact, sometimes it can help you to get their story going, to not necessarily ask the question, but to do it more in a statement. Like instead of what happened next, you can say, tell me more about what happened. And that can do the same thing, and it cannot feel quite so crazy with them when you're doing it. So here's a good example. Do not use a phrase like this. Do you want to be pregnant? Versus, how do you feel about your pregnancy? That's a good question to ask. How do you feel about your pregnancy? Any of those how do you feel questions are great. How are you feeling right now as you talk to me about this? Okay? Those are really good questions to ask that can help them. And again, like I said before, another really good technique is just using the tell me more. So let's take a look at this with one more fun skit with my fabulous boys, who are going to show you an example of someone asking good questions and an example of someone asking bad questions. Enjoy.
So why did you have your window rolled down? Why was she not buckled in? And why were you driving down the highway with your cat? And why did you not go out and try to help her?
About that.
You see, am I mad? I don't know.
Feeling like anxiety, man?
I don't know. I don't know what I'm feeling. It's kind of making me
It
feel.
looks like depression. Are you depressed?
Am I depressed? I'm starting to need a little uncomfortable here. I don't know what I feel.
Are you frustrated about it?
I don't know. I seem to be getting frustrated right now.
That's got to be intense. Are you like feeling any anxiety plus depression? Maybe thinking you have some mood swings in this.
I don't know.
Are you mad?
Dude, all I came to talk about was
Oh, man, I'm sorry.
my cat. My cat, who was 8 months
Is your
pregnant.
cat sad?
So how are you feeling while you're talking to me?
Well, being able to talk about how I lost Lorraine, the cat, when she jumped out and fell in the ditch and we lost the baby. I guess it's encouraging to know that you're listening to me.
Well, tell me more.
All right, so we talked about connecting with active listening. We talked about understanding what's going on with active listening and rephrasing, restatement, reflecting feelings, and asking good clarifying questions. And now we're going to talk about guiding. This is to help give a new perspective, to give information to help them make wise choices, and to close with hope. It's also called intervention, which we talked a little bit about beforehand, but now we're talking about it more just in a general turn when we're talking about Life Matters program, all of those things. This is where you help come up with a plan that will help encourage growth, like Life Matters classes, ultrasound appointment, church referrals. You're giving them a new perspective, and it might be just through your classes, educating them with the class they're watching, and then how can they apply that class to their life. So this is all part of it. It's the guiding part, which is what we do a lot with our Life Matters program. We're kind of guiding them through. We're pointing out strengths. We're pointing out the strengths that a person has, helping to see the natural strengths they have and to grow on those strengths. Look at areas where she or he has persevered in the past. Help them to do the best they can on their own. And here's an important thing too, we're going to talk about this again later, but only if a circumstance severely limits the person's ability to work through do you take extensive action. And if you do take action, you want to move the person to an independent role as soon as possible. In other words, we're being directive. We're not being directive. We're being facilitative. Okay? There's a difference. Directive does it for them. Directive says, oh, you need a place to live. Let me call somebody and get you a place to live, even though that's outside of our scope of service. That's not what we want to do. We're not a housing place, okay? We are a center that's going to help them, but we want them to do as much as they possibly can on their own. We're really not helping the client if we're constantly doing things for them. We want them to be able to be independent because then they start to feel empowered. If there's a phone call that needs to be made and they can make the phone call, they should make the phone call. We should not make the phone call for them, okay? If they need food, we can tell them where to get food and help them get to the places, the resources that are set up. We should not bring food to their house for them. I know that goes against what a lot of you feel because a lot of us, we're raised in the church. We feel like we need to love, we need to do this, we need to do as much as we can for the person. But we need to stay within our scope of services. We need to be facilitative. We need to help point out their strengths and help them to develop more strengths, help them to be able to develop those strengths they have and to be able to do things on their own and independently, or we're not really helping them at all. It's actually unethical to do everything for the client. So we're talking about ethics here too, where we want to help the client to have autonomy or independence, to be able to do more and more things on their own, because they're going to have to, right? If they're in a crisis pregnancy, they're going to have to get that baby to the appointments on their own. Eventually, they're going to have to do this stuff. So we can help them know where the resources are. We can help them at first when they're really in that crisis state and they can't function. But our goal is to get them beyond that, right? So if we keep helping them by doing things for them, we're actually teaching them learned helplessness. And that's not what we want to do either. So it's very, very important that we, at first, when they're first in crisis, we might do a lot for them. But we want to get beyond that. We want to have them start doing more and more things for themselves, showing them the resources that are out there, how they can get the help they need, but encouraging them to do that themselves. That's the difference. Here's some questions to ask when we're looking at directive versus facilitative, okay? For questions to ask before doing something for a client. Is this something the person could do for himself or herself? And if so, they need to do it themselves. We shouldn't be doing it for them. What will this accomplish in the long run? So before you do something for them, think, what am I teaching them? What is this going to accomplish in the long run? Is it going to make them more dependent on me? Or is it going to lead to them being able to be dependent and find the solutions on their own? Okay, ask yourself that. How long will I need to be involved in this way? If you give them something one time, am I going to have to keep giving them that? Do I have to keep bringing them milk every week or keep making the calls to the doctor's office? And if that's something that keeps going and going and going, that's not healthy. That's not a good thing. So ask yourself that. Are there any risks in doing this? And if so, what are they? Look at the risks. And how could this person be helped in a different manner? Is there something I could do that would help them in a different way besides just doing it for them? Again, we want to instill self-reliance. The person who comes in wants to be rescued. They want to be healed instantaneously by you. They want you to save them. But remember, we talked about before, you're not a savior, right? However, if you respond to that need of them wanting you to do everything for them, it's going to lower their self-esteem and in time create hostility towards you. Instead, assign responsibility. Do not do anything for the client that he or she cannot do himself or herself. If there's a choice between you and her making a phone call, she makes it every single time, okay? As long as she's able to do that. She makes the call. We do not want to lead them into learned helplessness. Okay? Other things to think of this, we want to help, we talked about this before, help her see other options, education, alternatives, help her see beyond the current circumstance. You always want to help your client see their identity in Christ. Gently challenge their preconceived identity. Gently focus her on what God says about her or what God says about him. One of your goals is to express your perception of him or her. You need to believe that she has value and worth and capabilities, and at the present time is simply overwhelmed by her present circumstances. And you need to help her see that she has that worth. Your assessment of the person may be more positive than his or her assessment of herself. But eventually, if you say it enough, she's going to hopefully accept your assessment of her. So help her see her identity in Christ. Every time she comes in for a Life Matters program, end in prayer. And when you're ending in prayer, reaffirm her identity in Christ and what Christ says about her. Help her to see that even if she's making bad choices, bad relationship after bad relationship, or bad decisions, that God still sees her as precious. Help her to see that. A lot of this can be accomplished through rephrasing and reflecting, like this. It seems to me that you feel like everything's hopeless. It seems to me that you feel like you're just not worthy. But did you know that God says that you are a chosen treasure, that he loves you, that he wants you to be his child? That's a pretty special thing. Okay, reflecting it. It seems to me that you feel like there's nothing you can do. But when I see how you have handled these situations in the past, it shows me that you're pretty strong and you can do it. I think you can. Okay, things like that. Redirecting, reflecting. Give her information, help him make a wise choice. This is truth with grace. We do this through Life Matters. We're giving information all the time, educating, helping them with that. Give referrals when needed. Some issues might need more professional help. Understand your limitations. When you can't do it, talk with your client services director about that and about how to get him or her the additional help that they need. And choose the right course class that will best help with whatever situation they're coming in with in front of you. Whatever it is that they're dealing with, there's probably a bright course class for it. There's a lot of bright course classes. So choose the right one to help them on that. And always end with hope. This can be a good time to share your story, if applicable, and how you found hope in Jesus, or a simple story that relates to what they're going to. But be careful about sharing stories. You don't want to do it too much so that it comes back on you. There's a time to do that and a time not to do it. Definitely don't share your story when you're initially listening to them. You want to wait until you've built a little bit of a relationship with them and rapport with them before you share. And then be careful about what you share. Make sure it's not focused too much on you, but rather on God and what he's done for you. And then you can share verses that give you hope, and you can ask if you can pray with your client. And these are all ways to share hope with the client. The goal of all of this is to create strong relationships with our clients that will help them make right choices. And as we talked about in our discipleship module, draw closer to Jesus. Because what we want them to do is draw closer to Jesus. And these are all ways we do that, through our communicating with them, through our active listening, through our offering them hope, offering them education, helping them to be empowered, to do things on their own, to recognize that they are created in the image of God and that they have strengths and abilities that God has given them, to help them to act on those strengths and abilities they have. So you're going to be doing a little bit of role playing today after you finish this module. Some fun stuff that you'll do with your shift leader or staff member that's there helping you through your training. And just do some just knowing that you're just trying to do this to help you become a little bit more comfortable with the listening, active listening, and with all of this stuff. So have fun with that. Do as many as you need till you feel comfortable with it. And you're done with this module. Thank you.